I think everybody has a close affiliation with retail, so I think this will be a very easy topic for everyone to connect to. We've been facing tremendous challenges in the retail industry, but this is nothing new. Retailers have been facing challenges for years. When you look at 2024, $30 trillion of global revenue flowed through retail commerce. The profit on that, on industry average across all the segments of retail, have been in the low to single digits. So retailers have always been thinking about how to innovate around internal stakeholder challenges as well as economic and global economy challenges that are affecting their operating models and really the voice of the customer. So to kind of frame out the industry challenges that we're going to be discussing, I thought I'd kind of just touch upon, the global economy challenges around inflationary challenges that have been experienced in 24, but also with the potential of a recession or even stagflation across global regions of many of our retailers face. The aspects of consumer expectations for frictionless commerce in the buying journey, the expectations of consumers around sustainability and ethical practices on how products or services are leveraged or used, as well as the operational prioritization between revenue generating or productivity challenges around technology investments. So with that, I'm going to let my panel briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll get right at it on some of the questions around that.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Anne Marie Appoliti. I'm the VP of E-commerce and Marketing with Michael Kors. For anyone who's not familiar with the Michael Kors brand, Michael Kors is an iconic American designer of ready-to-wear and accessories. I've been with Michael Kors about 9 years over the past 11 years with a brief intermission when I was at Nike, and 25 years in the retail industry, working across merchandising, planning, e-com, marketing, digital product management. So excited to be here. Thank you, Avasan, for having me.
Glenn?
My name is Glenn Kalakira. I'm a senior business and technology leader, currently an advisor and consultant at Johnson & Johnson. And prior to that, my retail experience is at very senior roles and even very hands-on roles at companies like Coach, which is now Tapestry, and Inc. also got bought and is now part of a larger group, Sycamore. And then also most recently at Estee Lauder Companies, where as an executive director, running large global transformation programs and being directly responsible for the global application portfolio. So, different roles over course, different companies, different industries, but definitely have a perspective on this. So thanks for being here.
Hi, I'm Wally Yosfat. I recently was the CIO for Capri Holdings, of which Michael Kors is a top brand. So I had the opportunity to work with Anne Marie in that great assignment. I'm Avasant Distinguished Technical Fellow. I've had CIO roles at Wyndham Worldwide and other manufacturing and retail companies, including many years as the CTO at Procter & Gamble out in Asia. I'm excited to be here and to be part of this great panel.
And thank you for joining me. So let's get to it. So the first area I really want to focus on is around capital investments around the value chain. We've got loyalty, customer experience, operations, data and analytics. You've got store operations. You've also have supply chain. And there's only limited capital around that. What strategies or insights can you share on how you're helping the organization prioritize those investments and which goes first? And I'll pose that to Anne Marie first.
Sure. So coming from the business side, I would say there's always conflicting priorities or multiple priorities with equal importance that touch various areas of the business. So with that, with my business lens, I'm usually starting with, is the strategic priority revenue driving or is it cost savings? And from a revenue driving perspective, I really start with what is the customer looking for? How can I serve the customer best? So multiple areas can be touched there, whether it's the customer experience, loyalty programs, I would say, and then on the cost saving side, really thinking about enablement of future customer experience. So potentially cost saving that will eventually drive some sort of customer benefit as well in the long run. And I think we also always just have those must-have items. I know the past few years, really things around whether it's security, compliance, those are just a must-have and have to make the list, sometimes at the expense of the revenue driving or the cost-saving element as well.
Wally, as a CIO, how do you deal with the healthy tension across the different business channels, the business units, the COO versus the CFO, and how do you, from a technology standpoint, help guide the organization, since you've had a very storied career, not only just at Capri but many other organizations?
Sure. It's number one secret, right, is partnering with great people. And so having the opportunity to work with Anne-Marie, with other leaders, you get a good, healthy dosage of what matters to the business, to the consumer, to the customer. And then by building a great IT team, you then get in order to support those great things, from the security aspect, from the data aspect, because it's been said multiple times, you can have great systems, great tools, great things to happen, but if it's built off of bad data, right? And sometimes we forget that we have to do the hard work of the data piece. And then, the infrastructure, whether it's the cloud, it's the stuff that people don't want to talk about, that powers or makes those things happen. And so I think the way that I trade off is putting all the priorities and projects and things on the table and forcing my colleagues to, with me, go through that prioritization and focus model. We can't do everything. And oh, by the way, do more with less, you want to cut, et cetera. So this is your opportunity to weigh in. We're not going to outsource strategy to a third party. Right? We have to set the strategy. We have to set the priorities and then use outside parties to help us do it better, cheaper, faster, like in security, right? To try and build that ourselves. There's firms that are out there paid to be able to do it, development firms, other partners in the business process. So it's prioritization and focus and hearing from the business.
How much pressure does voice of the customer play on those investment challenges versus what really just is bread and butter decision making?
Yeah, I'll answer real quick, and I can turn to Glenn as well. There are certain things that you learn the hard way. Before I got to Michael Kors and Capri, I was the CIO for Wyndham Worldwide, and when I joined, we had been breached 3 times in the hotel group. Security, the team there, with no offense, was like 5-year-old soccer. Everybody would surround the ball of the breach, and everybody would then go to the next breach, and no one's guarding the goal, type of thing. So we learned the hard way through a lawsuit from the FTC and a lawsuit to the board that says, you may not want to pay attention to this, but you have to. Right? And therefore, it held back other investments in other areas until we could get that under control. So I think it's trying to educate people on these are the downsides of not handling these key things. We have to make these investments and then use cost savings initiatives and AI to be able to say enables us to invest in other areas.
Glenn, any thoughts as well?
Yeah, I mean, to add to that, I would say the voice of the customer then became, for at least some of the companies I've been at, a must-have. You get the nice-to-haves, the must-haves being the security pieces and some of the other elements you're saying to maintain the business, improve supply chain, do other things like that. find efficiencies, cost savings, hit the bottom line. But the voice of the customer is critical enough to us when we were hearing things during pandemic changes, during response to store, how we were going to get our product to the customer, that they were still relying on that, and that we still wanted to also step up in a time of need. We pivoted in our strategy and our approach, like even during the pandemic, like reconverting our production facilities, to create, sanitizing liquids and things like that, and really kind of responding to the community need, in addition to maintaining our brand and our identity and our commitment to them in all aspects, like making the stores the safest environment we could for our employees and our customers. So I guess what I'm saying is, what I've learned in many years of doing strategy, as well as some of the work around portfolio management and leading portfolios and decisions around annual planning, is we always have a agile government cycle, so we can address things that come up as they come up during the year, and we revisit our strategy 4 times a year, and we go through it. So the criticality is always starting with the customer, making sure they're also part of the must-have decisions, along with the CFO, like we were talking about, and the cost objects and things that we need. So,
Thanks. Let's kind of talk about frictionless commerce. When we look at the channels and think of it as in, my simple terms of bricks, clicks, rings, and knocks, they're all important, but as we've all realized as retailers and operators, they all have different ROI paybacks relative to that. Focusing on the storefronts, if you look at 2024, we've had over 7,000 stores that closed last year. National Retail Federation is predicting another 15,000 to 20,000 stores that could close globally by early 2026, if not by the end of this year. However, we also see other retail storefronts and companies rethinking and reimagining the store. What's the purpose for the consumer? So as retailers, can you offer any tips on how you should be thinking about what the purpose of the store is as we're kind of going into the next wave of technology and frictionless commerce?
Sure. I like the idea of reimagining the store, as opposed to, I know there are a lot of store closures, and thinking about the ROI differently, which I think makes us have to start to have different KPIs to measure the health of the stores. I was recently talking to a store associate who said to me, I really need a sitting area in our stores for our customers who like to browse the website while they're shopping. So for me, that sounds very important. So while I don't necessarily want people just hanging out doing nothing in the store, at the same time, if they are a customer and they're choosing to shop somewhere else but sitting in that inspirational environment, how can I serve them differently, still give them that experience? And what is that new KPI? Is it time spent in stores? Is it time spent online? Is it, how much time across all of our channels, and eventually making a purchase?
I like that idea of sitting areas in stores, because my wife will be in the store longer because I'll be sitting on those chairs.
Yeah, it still benefits everyone, right?
100%.
If you're comfortable, your wife's comfortable.
Yeah. Any perspective on that?
Yeah, it's actually funny because I think the store is even more now an experience than it has been in the past, right? Like it used to be, the channel, and then, e-commerce was a channel, and then all the other channels on top of that. But now even more, it's become more of an extension of the experience that you started in whatever capacity you did. And especially in beauty, just to speak to my last role at Estee, it's an extension for multiple reasons. It's one, to gather more information and data on those critical, loyal customers, the partners that we've established over the years, and now our loyal customers are coming for special events and activities that are hosted at the store. They're also coming for their consult on a beauty platform basis where they can meet with an advisor and things like that. Different brands operate differently, but essentially it's extension of the experience, and it's also allowing them to interact in multiple ways. The IT department is, in particular, along in partnership with the different business units, has been able to use the store environment to showcase new technologies and capabilities like virtual try-on, coming from behind the countertop to do point of sale, on devices, to educate customers on product lines and things like that. So where we've looked at it, at least even reading the most recent put out by the CEO of the company, the new CEO, he talks about reimagining beauty. And that's the term that he's using, right? It's across the board, which includes heavy amount in the store and a heavy amount around the customer experience. So I guess what I'm saying is the store is being reimagined, like we're saying, like using that term, but it's an extension of the experience, and we see that as a more valuable thing than, it's an instant conversion, or an instant upsell for a customer. It's a relationship we're having with the customer.
Yeah, Anne-Marie, I think you were talking about how Michael Kors experiment on different store formats and, moving out of the malls. Maybe, touch upon how successful that's been through some of your test marketing and things around that.
And some of that is just testing different categories. So we've tested having men's stores, which has been successful. So where we had been traditionally women's stores, some with a men's section, where we had strong men's customers breaking out, having a men's store, as well as a smaller footprint where it makes sense. And from a concept shift, and I think this almost goes back to, the earlier point about what is the current KPI for how customers are shopping today. We have tested out in the past stores that were showroom stores. So perhaps we gave them very, very limited offering of product, single size run, to be able to encourage ordering for a shipment to their home. So buying in the store a purchase that would eventually be shipped to them as opposed to fulfilling it at that time.
Okay. When we think about innovative approaches across sustainability and ethical practices that consumers are expecting from the products or services that they're buying, there's a balance between the cost to implement and execute and profitability on that. So maybe we can chat a little bit around some of the KPIs on how that's being executed in today's world. Wally, you want to maybe touch on that?
The workshop that we had on Sunday, right, for those of us who were able to participate in that, one of the things that key phrases that came out at the very beginning, and we didn't think we were going to talk about sustainability, right? And yet that was the opening topic, and we spent all this time on it. And it came down to a key phrase of what really matters to the customer, right? The customer, if it matters to them that the green is there, right? It's not greenwashing. It is truly a best use of the planet. We talked about, Anne-Marie, the refurbished or the pre-owned and the return of things, and so that you're not creating necessarily new, but leveraging what's already been done. And if you can deliver what matters to the customer in an effective, efficient way, particularly I think in luxury, the consumer is used to, for luxury, paying a decent price for it. And I don't think what we do often enough is to publicize, by the way, this great product that you like, this is what we're doing. This is what we're making happen. In other words, you have the ability to buy this product, right, and enjoy this product, knowing also some things behind the scene that we're doing no harm or doing good for the environment.
Anne-Marie, you had touched upon where Michael Kors for years have been doing sustainable practices, but you hadn't been telling your customers about it. So maybe you can kind of talk on how that Michael Kors has somewhat pivoted recently in getting that messaging out.
Yeah, so when we think about sustainability, it actually touches or is a part of so many people's jobs within the company across various roles. So you have our production teams are producing fabrics, in tanneries that are the highest level of certification of environmental standards. So 99% of our leather goods. And that's something that we realized we are doing these great things. We should just tell our customer about it. So we found a way to showcase that on our website and across different touch points in the journey, as opposed to it being a secret page like an About Us that very few people look at. In addition, 99% of our packaging is either from recycled product or is sourced from or is recyclable. So that's another thing we wanted to highlight. So these were all things we were actually already doing. And so it's very cheap to just find a way to tell the customer about it because we know it's important to them. And then, that also gives us the ability to start testing other ways to potentially invest in things. We already did some low-cost things around sustainability, and then we were able to do things like testing our resale program that Wally mentioned. So both resale, peer-to-peer resale program, as well as a refurbished program.
What's your experience been, Glenn, with assisting the organizations on that?
Yeah, I mean, within some of the companies I've been at, and a lot of it is two-pronged, right? Some of it is related to the store build-out and store creation and, how you plug into the local environment and the water usage and the build-out of materials and everything that we've come to know as green construction and all those things gets utilized at the actual store level. And then you get the product packaging and all the other pieces of the components that we can advertise and say are sourced in the right way and from the right place. And then the production of materials we talked about too, and the raw materials. I think with the advertising though, which is interesting that Michael Kors is doing, at some of the companies I've been at, it hasn't been first and foremost in front of the consumer. And I think that's interesting because I would think in more product, oriented health and beauty products, it would be, extremely important. And I'm not saying it's not, it's just I have not seen where they've taken the steps to really get the word out. So it's interesting when you look at a consumer base and you asked about the KPI, what's the reason they're associating with the brand or the product? Is it primarily driven by the end result product, or is it also the practices behind it? And I think that is where AI, and I know we'll eventually talk about AI, but could play a role because just understanding, the motivation and the data and statistics about conversion of customers who want that within their product line.
Even just on that note with AI, I think, we're doing so much to find a way to tell our customer about sustainability if they care about it. But if they start searching, if they're already searching on ChatGPT, is Michael Kors sustainable? Potentially, they'll get the response based on our CSR report being out there, and it'll be a different way for us to have to make the effort of communicating to the customer.
So since you did bring up AI, let's pivot to AI.
Can I build real quick on
Sure.
which leads to your AI piece? Another thing Michael Kors is doing, and that I haven't seen the other two brands do and took the lead on, is the 3D imaging. In other words, instead of building these hard samples, these things you can touch and feel, and therefore you have to use physical product, and then there's scrap and throwaway and this and that. It is the 3D imaging of those models of where you rotate, you can look at use of the data, use of AI to be able to create products and samples and then test it that way. And the throwaway costs are bits and bytes. Which is great. I think it started, if I'm not mistaken, in more of the footwear and the accessories piece, and now is expanding out. And so it's a more sustainable way using the power of technology and reducing waste, reducing costs, even reducing time and effort in terms of what's there. So maybe a good lead-in.
Yeah, so with AI driven operations, if you look at the last 2 years, based on our data, close to 90% of all AI initiatives were really first focused on and have been focused on productivity and efficiency areas across the operations. Within the last 6 to 9 months, though, we're seeing a material shift looking towards revenue-driven opportunities or building brand or loyalty across the customer chain. So maybe you can kind of talk about how are you thinking through not so much the decision making, but which area to kind of go after first on the revenue side because it hasn't been proven so much through use case. Anybody?
So I would say for us, because I manage e-com, it's been fairly easy to test AI in lightweight ways on actually the more revenue driving side. So I'll give the example of search and discovery using AI for one, to enhance product feeds, and then eventually moving on to semantic search. And these are all things that have a direct impact to our customer. So in the past, when our customer would search for a sparkly dress, maybe we only attributed it as black dress or evening. And now we can serve our customer with whatever their current terminology is, which we know on social media, language changes so much every day. So that was inherently revenue driving. But at the same time, I think we realized the side effects that were cost beneficial and operationally beneficial, not having to do all of those manual attributions that we had before. And then as we have this information available to us, finding different ways to leverage it for analytics across the company as well. So in some ways, we've been able to start with revenue and have cost benefits as a side effect.
Wally, any additional perspective?
You know, we learned a lot in the potential partnership with Tapestry, which didn't go forward, obviously. But you know, one of the things that we know, and it's public, it's out there, et cetera, is the use of AI through the shopper experience. That at checkout, at you know, you're ready to empty the cart, pay for it, et cetera. You know, you shopped for these materials or these products. We happen to have also on sale an additional accessory or something else you might like to be able to do. You know, based upon the volume of what you've done here, here's an additional discount on a luxury item, and it was shown to drive revenue. So I think, and we've talked about that with Anne-Marie and with the team, that there are these flows of the customer experience where there's the upsell, there is the based on your product history, there is the based on your preferences of what you've gone through and clicked through, that there's data out there, and then it's just taking advantage of that data to drive more revenue.
Last question before we kind of wrap is the need for flexible operating models and dealing with the global uncertainties of whether, you know, the tariff impact, another pandemic type, you know, unexpected. What and how do you look at the optimum partnership model of internally delivered service capability versus leveraging partners, and how do you go about through that decision process? And I'll pitch that to Glenn first.
Yeah, I think especially like I hinted at earlier and mentioned, we pivoted during the pandemic of my old company. There was definitely a move towards better synergies, less reliance on outside contract for proprietary systems and data and information that we can use as a competitive advantage. So realizing that and coming out of that time frame was, how can we make a better investment in how we operate, how we work, proximity to our business partners across the globe, those vendors that we've created strategic alliances with, can we look at those in a different way and align, you know, with less amount in quantity, and also hire more people with talent that would take us to the next level. So we looked at it multiple ways. not just within the IT department, but across the company. That's even something I read in the recent strategy that they're doubling down on. So what we ended up doing was creating global innovation centers to promote the development of new in-house product line. We hired another 300 plus people into the IT department. We looked at how we were addressing critical projects and programs, and we sourced people within those locations, partnerships with those vendors like Wipro and some other people that we had to look at, really coming in line with achieving those objectives in a shorter time frame. So the operating model was also in an agile way. We looked at agile development, bringing that in-house, and we've done all that. Actually, it's now fast forward a year and a half, and we already have 4 more centers globally in place. We've hired all those people. We put people in positions to make decisions. We've enabled governance in the right way. So, really looking at it the end-to-end and saying, how do we adapt for this changing environment in a way that accommodates new technology, allows to tap into local resources, and put us in a more competitive advantage?
No, that's a great answer. And, Wally, kind of dovetailing off of that is the aperture of bringing in new partners versus leveraging the devil that who've been in your environment for multiple years and have gone through generational change with you. How do you, what's the aperture in today's marketplace for that?
It changes over time, and I've been on both sides of it. Being a CIO for these businesses and then being a CIO and a CEO for Genpact in the Americas and providing those services. And so my model has evolved over time, but where possible is not to put all the eggs in one basket, also not to spread the eggs in 3 or more baskets. It's really where you can have 2, right? And there's more than enough business to go around. If we could take all of our vendor mix and all of our partners and get to just 2, I'd be happy, right? Because there's multiple vendors. And, a good example of that is the Capri team in Asia, based out of China. There are certain technologies, tool sets, et cetera, that either they can't afford or whether it's government regulations or whether it's proprietariness of data and so forth, they may not be able to use the global standard, or it may not be cost effective for them in the growing markets to be able to do. Having the flexibility of 2 that says there's more than enough business out there, there's no entitlement that just because you have the global contract means we're not going to shop and take a look. And that's how you turn the devils that into the angels who can help you, right? When they start realizing that, just like Michael Kors, we're not entitled to that luxury goods market, right? We're not entitled to handbags. We're not entitled to those pieces. Well, we've got to figure out, learning from our competition, what's the best way to do, just like they do, right? And therefore, it introduces the healthy competition, but keeps the complexity as simple as possible.
No, thanks. And I want to thank all 3 of you for trying to help unpack a little bit of touching upon omnichannel, consumer expectations, and sustainability, and the ever-changing place of the retail marketplace. So thanks, and we're going to call it a wrap. And I believe we're on to a break.
Yes. Thank you all. Let's give this panel and Harvey a round of applause. Thank you so much.